here for the first time. Okay, let's get started. It's on the hour. So this is how the session works for those of you that are brand new. We are going to be, it's a Q&A session, but it's about the effective pricing software, and we usually spend about 20, 25, 30 minutes where there's a theme, and I will show you some stuff, and then we'll go to questions. So if you have questions at any point in time, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, just stick them in the comments box, but please do this. Please put a double Q, capital Q, QQ at the front, and perhaps a question mark afterwards, because I know there's lots of comments and chat goes on, which is awesome. And Sarah's here, and my daughter Gabby to sort out any technical issues. And so I sometimes I can miss things with all the chat going on and so on. So put a big 2 capital Qs in front of your question, and they will then jump out, and I'll get to them. I'll see them. Before we dive into the content, one other thing that many of you know that we do is whenever we do live training like this, as a thank you for you being here live, we want to make the world a better place. So we always make a contribution to a project through the B1G1 organization. And we choose a different project at every single live session. So the project for today's session is we want to help people out in rural Western Kenya, where they really struggle to get access to clean water, particularly important in hospitals and for medical needs. So for each and every one of you that's here live today, we'll be adding up the numbers at the end. And for each person, we will make a donation, a contribution on your behalf to provide a day's worth of clean water to a person over in Kenya. So collectively, we can change the lives of a number of people. So thank you for being here. We always do that with our live sessions, and that's through B1G1, amazing organization doing some great stuff around the world. Right, so let's get into the content. So today we've had a change. If you've just joined late and expecting Emily, we haven't got Emily because she's not well today. So Emily was going to cover, the theme for today was going to be how do we create amazing proposals and design them. I'm going to show you in a little while. I'll show you something that you can do based on some work that she's been doing for one of our members just this week, just so you can see as a sneak preview for what will now be rescheduled and come next week. So this time next week, all being well, Emily will be fit, well, healthy, and she'll be doing that session that was supposed to be today next week. So today, what I thought I'd do is bring forward what I was going to do next week to this week. So we just swapped, okay, that's it, a simple swap. Today's session is going to be aimed primarily at beginners. So if you're new to the software, then this is definitely for you. If you're advanced, then you're probably here for Emily. I'm so sorry, but we'll get Emily back. Don't worry. So today, what I want to do was really look at some of the foundations of what the software is all about how we use it to give a fixed price. And I thought as a theme, I'd use cleanup work, so for Kim Lafayette, it's obviously good timing because she's going to start pricing in this way for cleanup work. So let's start with, before we dive into the software, what I'm going to do is, I got a question, which I think I have a copy of it somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So I got this question. I was doing a webinar for Veronica Wazek. Many of you know Veronica, a good friend of mine. She's the cleanup expert in teaching people how to do cleanup work. And I was doing a session just a week or two ago to her audience on how to price cleanup work. And we look primarily at the diagnostic and how do you price the diagnostic. I focus mainly on that. And Helene was there and she said afterwards, she said, Mark was amazing, so much great info, brain overload. But she then said the one thing I was confused about is how to price a job even after the diagnostic review with menu method. She meant menu pricing. If someone had 100 transactions or 500 transactions a month. So just to explain that a bit better, that's what she asked. And so today is going to answer that. But essentially what I was teaching in that particular webinar was primarily how do we price the diagnostic review to start with, which we use to collect and gather information about how much work's involved. We're getting paid to do the diagnostic. And then I talked about the importance of, when we then do the full project, as with any service, the importance of giving people choices, different options, menu pricing. Think of it, if you like, as the bronze, silver, gold. And so I think the confusion, my fault, the confusion for Helene was then, okay, so I understand menu pricing, but how do I come up with the price? Because I'll have some clients with 100 transactions to sort out, some with 500 transactions. The scope of the work is different for every client. How do we come up with the price? And that's where the software comes in. Because if you're pricing, we need to be shifting to value pricing. We shouldn't be pricing based on the hour, and there's lots of reasons for that. We should be pricing based on value. But one of the things that is challenging for us is because we're selling complex services. We're not selling cups of coffee. We're not selling widgets. We're selling very complex services like cleanup work, like bookkeeping, where every client is different. The scope of the work is so very different. And so even though we are value pricing, we also want to have a system, a structure for assessing the scope of the work and using the scope to create, if you like, a baseline price, a minimum price, a price that we never go below, so we make a profit. And then we start to do other things like menu pricing, giving choices, so the customer can choose other things based on where they see the value. So that's kind of the thinking behind the scenes. So I'm going to show you how you do that. But before you ever dive straight into the software, one of the things that you want to do is, and this is really important, the software, which you will see soon, the software is designed to be used in front of the client. We should have the conversation with the client. When I say in front of the client, in the world we have today, that can also mean on a Zoom call with screen share. So the point of the software is to use it with the client, to involve the client in the pricing process so they can see how the price is being built up. But before we get to there, before we do that, before we even look at software and calculating price, before we do that, the first thing we have to do is build up the value. We have to talk to the client about what we do. What are we going to do as part of our, in this case, cleanup work? What are we going to do? What are the different packages, different options? How are we going to communicate the value, build up the value? And a great way of doing that is to have a system, is to have a professional looking brochure. And so just the other day, one of my students from the Value Pricing Academy, Nina from Insightful Financial, she sent me a copy of her brochure. She took the brochure that we create in the Value Pricing Academy. She went to Stephen Baldwin of Noir, the designer. Many of you know and use Stephen. Why was that? Okay, I was told there was no volume there. That's fixed. Okay, sorry. I'm having all sorts of muting problems this particular week, as some of you know. So what I was saying, for those of you who can't lip read, is the purpose of the brochure is to provide you with a script, a process to go through and build up the value, and then you would get to the bit where, which I've now lost because I was scrolling so fast, where you would show your bronze, silver, gold, your different options, talk to the client about the different types of cleanup that you could do. Do they want a basic, simple cleanup, or do they want to go beyond that and have so much more? So that's the purpose of the brochure. And this one happens to be Nina's. She kindly shared it. And I will tell you later, watch this space, why I'm just showing you Nina's. There's a reason for that. It's kind of a preview for next week, a sneak preview. Okay, so that's what we do before we dive into the software. We want to build up the value, we want to communicate the value of what we do, and we also want to talk about our different options. Think of it as the bronze, silver, gold. And ideally what you want to do is to get the client to say which package they want to buy before we then talk about price. And there's a reason for that. Kim says, is Nina here in chat today? I actually have no idea, but I just saw that comment, so I'll shout out in case she is. So we've gone through our system. We've built up the value to the client. Client wants to buy the cleanup service. They've even now said which one is the one that's most appropriate for them. Usually the middle one. Lots of people are saying you're back right now, I can see. There's a bit of a delay. Usually people go for the middle one. So when they say, that's the one I want you to do that service, that's the cleanup I want, so what's the price? When we finish building up the value, we're now ready to talk about the price. And because of the scope issues, we have to ask scope questions. And also, we want to give the client choices because everybody values things differently. So this is where the software comes in. I'm going to switch across now. Let me just move that out of the way. So I'm just going to also put me back on the screen. So we're into effective pricing right now. And for those of you that are brand new, never seen it, have no idea what the software does, it's designed to price any service that you like. The limit's your imagination. We just happen to be looking at cleanup work today. So what I would do is I would use the cleanup work model, and I would be in front of the client. I know which one they want me to do the work. They've chosen the package they want. They want the middle package. The only thing left now is to agree the price. So at this point, what I would do is I would ask a series of questions. And there are two types of questions that we want to ask. Two types of questions. The first type of question is the scope questions. We want to make sure that we calculate a price that's going to give us a profit. And so we would ask our scope questions. And if it was cleanup work, I've built this cleanup model as an example of the sorts of questions you might want to ask. As you perhaps know, you can change all the questions. Everything can be changed. But the scope questions you might want to ask with cleanup work are probably a little bit similar to bookkeeping. So probably the number of transactions or the number of sales invoices or the number of purchases, whatever you want to use as your quantification of number of transactions. I've got how many sales invoices per month do you raise? You might want to change that to the total number of transactions. Remembering, of course, that if you're doing cleanup work, you've probably done a diagnostic review. And as part of the diagnostic review, hopefully you've now got all of this information. So perhaps you know that this particular client has 100 transactions a month. So we'll go with that. The next question might be, well, how far behind? How many months worth of cleanup are there? And so you might have done in your diagnostic, recognize that they are behind by 5 months. We would want to make sure that we ask what is their accounting system, because if they are using your preferred accounting system, it makes your life easier. But if they're using a system that you have never used before, then you'll want to have a higher price for that. Let's imagine on QBO. You might want to ask what industry they're in. It may be that you find from your experience that some industries have more complex cleanup work because of various things that you find typically go wrong. Let's imagine we've got a client here in the construction industry. We might want to know if they're registered for sales tax, VAT in the UK. We might want to know if they're a cash business or they raise invoices. We might want to ask how many bank accounts they have that would need reconciling. So perhaps they have 2 bank accounts. They might have 2 credit cards that want reconciling. And perhaps they need their payroll journals sorting out and foreign currency transactions. So these are the sorts of scope questions that would help you to understand how much work's involved with a cleanup project. And behind the scenes, the software would then go away and be doing some calculations to come up with a price that will give you, which will ensure that you make profit on the cleanup work. So then we hit save and continue, because we're not finished. They're the scope questions, but more important questions are what I call preference questions. We want to give people choices. And this is fundamentally important with value pricing, because everybody values things differently. Everybody wants different things. And so when we give people choices and let them choose the things that they want, then A, they get the exact package that they want, the service that they want. And secondly, those things that they then choose and say yes to, we know they value those things, and so we can put the price up. We can build that into the price. Now, they don't know at this stage what that price is, and you'll see shortly how that can really help you. So we might, for example, want to ask them, Actually, there's a couple more scope questions here. Are they behind with their filing of tax returns? Are they behind with payments of tax? Because if they are, that's not necessarily greater scope of work, but if they are behind, there's a greater sense of need, a greater sense of urgency. And when there's a greater sense of urgency, people are generally willing to pay a higher price for you to solve the problem. If they've got the taxman on their back and you're going to do the cleanup work and get the taxman off their back by getting them up to date with stuff, then there's more value. We can charge a higher price. That's the reason for those questions. But we also might want to ask questions like, do they want our fast track service? Are they in a rush for this? Because if they're in a rush, if they want it done fast, then yes, we can quite happily drop all of our other clients' work for now and focus on them and do it. But of course, they pay a premium price. So we should ask the question, do you want our fast service, or are you not so worried about how long it takes? Most people say, I want it done fast. Great, we'll do it fast. Do you want us to work at your premises, or are you happy to work remotely? Might be another option you give them. These are just merely suggestions that you might want to think about. Do you want us to come and collect and deliver your paperwork? Might be another one. And you can think of many others, other options that you can give people. So let's say the client says yes to all those things. We then hit save and continue. Now we've finished asking the questions. We can now remind the client what's in the different packages, and this should reflect what's in the brochure that we went through. And in this case, I remember the client wanted the middle one, the full cleanup, so I can remind them if I want to what they get and what they don't get as part of that. And once the client has got to the stage where they want to buy, the only thing left is the price. We just hit the fixed price button, and it now says 3 payments of $1,119. Now at this point in time, only 2 things can happen. Either they say yes or no. It's as simple as that. They either yes or no. If they say, yep, I'm happy with that, then you're happy because you will have got a good price for doing the work. And that's great. But if they say that's too expensive, that's more than they can afford, then what we can do is, well, firstly, we could offer a different package that's on the screen right here. But before we even do that, we know the client wants the middle option. So what we can do is we can go back and we can start to change some of the things that they answered. So we might say to the client, the reason it's that price, $1,119, 3 payments of, the reason it's that price is because you would like us to work at your premises. Is that really important to you? And now what we're doing is the client can now reflect on those things they said yes to as to whether they really are important or not. Or they just said yes because it sounded like a cool thing to have. So when they say, no, you can work, it's not that important, I guess. You could work, it doesn't matter if you do it at your office. So we can just switch that from yes to no. And what happens is when we go back, it recalculates. It's now just 1,076. And here's the important thing to bear in mind about the software. Your clients, when you talk to clients, have no idea what the price should be. Nobody knows what the price of cleanup work should be. There's no such thing as a market price for cleanup work. There's no guidance at all. There's no science behind price. And so they don't know what the price should be. And that first price you reveal, the 3 payments of 1,119, creates an anchor in their mind. It might be that it's too high, but now what they do is they assess every other price in the context of that number. They want to buy from you. They just can't afford 3 lots of 1,119. It's now 1,076. They feel much better about it, and they might well buy. But if it's too expensive, we can go back. We can say, well, if that's too much for you, why do you want it done so fast? If it's not urgent, then it'll be cheaper if we do it in a couple of weeks' time rather than immediately. What would you prefer? If they really want it done now, they'll have to pay that price. But if they say, I guess it doesn't really matter, what would it be if we do it a little bit slower? Well, if we do that, it'll only be 900. And then there's a third question, and you could have more questions as well. In other words, what happens is we work with the client face to face, and if the price is too high, we simply change the package in some way. We change something. Now, if we've exhausted those questions and 3 payments of 900 is still too expensive, there's always the cheaper package, the bronze option. In this case, I've called it the quick cleanup. We can always offer something else. And another thing that we can do is, of course, we can discount. We can discount. But we should never ever crash and burn on price. We should always maintain the integrity of our pricing. We should be confident about pricing. We shouldn't discount. However, what we can do is we can swap things. I call this behavior rewards, where we swap something. And so there's a little button up here called BR. It could say discount, but if it said discount, every client would say, oh, what's that discount button? What does that do? Will you do some special deals? The BR button is for you if you want to go lower than 3 payments of 900, in this case, with these numbers. If the client's not sure they can afford 900, then what you could do is you could say, well, it may be that they're not on your preferred cloud account, your preferred system. Perhaps they're on Sage and you're a QBO Pro Advisor. You might say, well, if as part of the cleanup you move as well to QBO, we can do the cleanup cheaper because it then means that we can sort it all out on QBO, for example. And if we do that, it's just 810. Or if you don't need the full operational review and full report from that package, we can take that out and that brings the price down to 810 rather than 900. Or if we do both those two things, it's just 720. Or if you pay us in full in advance, rather than 3 installments of 720, we can give you a 10% discount. It's then just that's £3 of 630 if you pay it all up front. So we can swap things with the client. I call it behavior rewards because we're rewarding people with a lower price when they do behaviors that we value, things like paying us early, giving us better quality information, perhaps not needing some of the things or moving to a better system. That's the behavior reward. So let's imagine that they now say, yep, I'm happy with 3 payments of 630. It started off at almost $1,200. It's almost come down by half. And that's the point, that the thing about, we don't know what people are willing to pay. Everybody's willing to pay a different price. Everyone's willing to pay a different price. And what our job is to do is to start to uncover what it is they value, how do they value, how much are they willing to pay. And the only way to figure that out is to go in with confidence with a price that's too high. And the thing about using software and using effective pricing is they can see that you're not making a number up. There's some perceived science there. They're using a system that calculates a price. It's not you making up a number, it's the system. And so when the system comes up with a price that's too high, what we're doing is firstly creating an anchor in their mind. They want to buy, it's just the price is too high. And so what we do is we work with them. We change things one step at a time, because somewhere between that $1,119 a month and $600 a month, they'll say yes. We don't know where they'll say yes, so we start high and we work down bit by bit. Okay, hope that makes sense. That's the idea behind the software. We're going to get into Q&A in about 5 minutes time. There's a couple more things I want to show you. Let me just go back to the software. So the next thing I just want to show you is that's the main reason for the software. You can then, of course, offer upsells, additional items. Now, I've not set any up in this particular model, but in the enhancement stage, you could offer them other things. Would you like this fancy report? Would you like me to complete your tax returns while we're at it? So that's called the upsell. I'm not going to go into that in more detail now. I just want to mention it. But once the client is happy with the price, 3 payments of $630, we can then just confirm the payments, when they're going to be paid, and we can negotiate on a payment plan if necessary. And then that's it. That's the end of the process in front of the client. We've agreed the price and when they're going to pay. The final page just is a confirmation of what they've said, how they've answered the questions, what the price is. So there may be a few more things that you do with the client just to say this is what happens next. So you might explain how they sign an engagement letter, how they set up the payment plan, you'll have your onboarding process, whatever it might well be. But one thing you'll want to do is get that fixed price agreement or proposal signed off. So the main reason for the software is to agree the price in the way that I've just shown you. But what you can then do is once the client's left the office, you can then create the proposal. So I'm going to, and we can choose which, I'm going to pick one of my proposal themes. I'm going to give it a name as CU 03. It's my third cleanup project this year is the project name. And then what we can then do is we can go straight to our proposal template that we've chosen. And we can make some changes to it if we want. But if we don't want to, if I hit save and continue, it'll take a few seconds while it just pulls in all the client's keywords and data. And when it's done that, it will then pull in the proposal. Let me just make it so you can see it. This is this particular proposal. It'll pull in the client's name, the date of the proposal. It will pull in automatically for you things like, let me just find all the questions they answered, how they answer those questions, the fact they have between 70 and 120 transactions a month, they're 5 months behind. All that's recorded in the proposal automatically, so there's complete clarification over the scope. When the client signs this, they're signing it to say, yep, this is my scope of work. I'm on QBO. I'm in the construction industry. Yes, I have 2 bank accounts that want reconciling. It also confirms exactly what you will do as part of the package they've chosen and what you won't do, because that's a more expensive package. It'll confirm things like any of those any upsells that you might have done, or behavior rewards if they agreed, in this case, to pay you in full and save 10%. It says yes. So again, you've got it in writing and signed off. So that's in the software, you can then create the proposal really fast. Okay, I wanted to show you a couple more very quick things. Just bear me a second. 2 things and then we'll go to questions. So I showed you at the start, I showed you Nina's brochure. She's in the Value Pricing Academy. So if you're in the Academy, I create brochures for you. And then if you want to, you can get them beautifully designed like Nina's. Have I got that somewhere to hand? Oh, I've turned it off now. But one of the things that you can do with the software is you can build really nice proposals. We've made some changes just a couple of weeks ago. And what Emily's going to show you next week is how you can do some more advanced stuff to create really nice proposals. So you can, if you want to, if you have those, as Stephen has those landscape brochures that you use to have the communication process, you can also then have those same themes filter through to your proposals. So I'm just trying to remember where I've put it. It's here. Okay. So this is what that Emily has just designed for Nina. This is in her version of the software. So when she's agreed the price and so on, she will then go to create the proposal, and it says here Emily's template, test client, all that information will be brought in automatically into the proposal with the keywords. So similar to the one I just showed you within the software, and this is just a PDF of one that's inside Nina's software, and what you can see, it'll pull through, for example, automatically in something that fits her branding and colours. There's how the questions might have been answered for that particular proposal, what they've agreed to do, what's in the package, what are the this is the upsell. Yes, the upsells. What other things did the client say yes to or no to? What were the behaviour rewards? What other things did the client agree to do? And then there's the back page. So that's the quality of design of proposal that you can build into the software. So it's primarily used. The software is really primarily is there to give you the confidence to sit in front of a client and come up with a much higher price. But it also saves you a huge amount of time in creating brochures. So I showed that as a sneak preview for next week, because next week when Emily's better, and I think she's getting better now, when Emily's with us next week, she's going to be showing you exactly how she created that for Nina. She'll show you how she created that for Nina. She might show some other examples as well, and how you can do exactly the same thing and have beautiful proposals and fixed price agreements inside your copy of Effective Pricing. And the last thing to say, and then we'll get into questions, is if you are brand new, if you've not used the software yet, or you're new to it and getting up and running, one of the things we created a few months ago now to help you was a series of getting started checklists. And I think Sarah's going to put a link somewhere in the chat box to where you can download this and access it. So there's a checklist that walks you through the steps of the onboarding. If you've gone through that already, the other checklists are things like how to create your first pricing model. So it tells you the steps to run through and sometimes some links to where to find training videos and so on. If you want to create, when you create your first quote, there's a checklist. So what I just did just now, that walks you through that process. The pricing success metric, it shows you how to create your one-page proposals. I didn't show us today, but I'll cover that another time. It shows you how to create your proposal template. So if you want to have proposal templates, it shows you the steps you want to go through to do that. It also shows you how to produce your proposal, the steps, how to set up keywords, and how to get help. Okay, so that's that. I want to mention that because if you're not aware of those checklists, they'll really help you get up and running with the software. I can see Sarah's at least definitely posted that into the Facebook group, and I think it's coming into the YouTube group page as well. Okay, that's it. Q&A now. We're going to answer questions. By the way, if you're brand new, these sessions are always 60 minutes. We finish bang on the hour because it's Friday. It's 5 o'clock in the UK. It's 5 o'clock in Portugal where we are. Not now, but it will be in 29 minutes. And so it's the end of the week soon. So we're going to do 29 minutes of answering as many questions as possible. If you have a question, make sure you put QQ in front. So just bear with me a second while I just go back through the chat box to see what questions you've got. And if you haven't asked your question yet, put it in the chat box. I definitely saw one question a little while ago. I'm just looking through because a lot of people said earlier, is the mic off? There's no sound. Lost the sound. Can't hear you anymore. Yeah, that's all those. Let's get through those. We lost the audio. You're back. Okay, Sarah Kelly, you're the first one I can find. Here we go. There's not too many questions yet, so get your questions in and I will be answering them. So Sarah says, how many of each type of questions, scope and preference would you recommend? That's a great question, Sarah. So I would recommend, let's look at scope first. With the scope questions, I would recommend that you ask all of the scope questions that are important, that are critical, but don't over-analyze. I would try to keep the scope questions to no more than 10. Now that will differ from service to service because if you're doing cleanup work, if you're doing bookkeeping work, perhaps payroll as well, it's very complex, every client's different, and scope's is very important. With some other services, scope's not quite so important. So an example might be perhaps doing cash flow forecasting. Might not be as many scope questions involved. That's probably not a great example. Another one might be moving a client to a cloud accounting system. You want to know if things are up to date, of course, but if they are up to date, there's not a lot of scope questions that you need to ask. It's more preference questions. So it will depend from service to service, but even the most complex services, take bookkeeping, payroll, cleanup work, we don't want to overanalyze. If you want, and I've seen people having models with 20, 30, 40 scope questions, if you want to do that, you can do, but there'll be certain scope factors that have a bigger impact on the amount of work than others. So in the case of bookkeeping and cleanup work, the number of transactions is very important, clearly. A business with 500 transactions a month is very different to one with 10 transactions. The number of bank accounts you have to reconcile is quite important, but there'll be others that are less so. And so, for example, it's important to know how many active trading accounts that the client uses because you're going to have to reconcile those. But if they have some inactive, dormant savings accounts, they're not so important. And so we want to identify what are the most important questions because there's no exact science here. What we're doing here is value pricing. The scope questions are just to give us a minimum, a starting point, a minimum part in terms of the calculations that we never go below. So we always get the minimum price that we need to get. So Don't have too many. Now, when it comes to preference questions, with preference questions, they are the more powerful questions. And whilst I didn't have many in that particular model, I would recommend a minimum of 3 preference questions. And if you've got 7, 8, 9, 10 questions, that's brilliant. Because A, people like choice. People like choice. When you sat down with a client, asking scope questions is quite boring. So tell me, how many transactions do you do a month is fairly boring. But asking somebody if they'd like this fancy, really nice report that you do, oh wow, that looks a really nice report. Yes, please, I'd love to have that. So giving people choices is really powerful because A, people like choice, people like to choose things, and the more powerful, and what's even more powerful is when they choose things, it's them telling you, yes, I value that. I want to deal with you and not your assistant. I value doing it fast. I value that extra report. So when they're telling you they value those things by saying yes, then the price is going up. And that's good. Because what we want to do is when we then finally hit that fixed price button and show the price, we want that price to be too high. Which I know is perhaps scary because in the past we hate it when the client says, that's ridiculous, that's so expensive. Because we then panic and we don't know what to do because we kind of made the number up and now we can't really backtrack very easily. But we have a system here because the client can see how the price is building up, and when the price is too high, then we can say, okay, let's work together and change a few things. Let's look at which of those things that you said yes to are perhaps not so important? And let's go back and look what the price might be if we take that out. And there's some important price psychology going on here, which is the anchoring, that we start with a high price, it creates an anchor, and then we work down from there. So I hope that helps with that question, Sarah, about how many of each type of question, scope and preference. Scope questions, don't overanalyze, try to keep it to less than 10 if possible, but preference questions, they're great. And I would have a minimum of 3, but if you can get 5, 10, 15, that would be awesome. The other reason, though, why you want to keep the number of scope questions relatively small is because the more questions you ask, behind the scenes it's doing some calculations, it's doing some maths, which you can change the prices, but the more calculations that are taking place, the more testing you've got to do to test different scenarios, and it'll take you longer to get to the stage where you're happy. I would recommend, and a big problem I see is people saying, I've been using this software for 6 months, I love it. Have you used it in front of a client? No, I'm still just playing around with the prices. Well, that's crazy. You're never going to know. At the end of the day, it's going to be the clients that are going to tell you if the prices are right or not, as to whether they say, yes, that's okay, or that's way too expensive. We have to use it in front of clients. And what will happen is sometimes we might go in with a model and find that we went in a bit low. And we wish we'd asked this extra question. That's fine, because you have a system now. You learn from it, and you now add in the extra question. So don't try to get your model perfect. Get a model that you think is acceptable, use it, and then when you discover perhaps I should have asked those extra 2 questions, you add it in for next time so you get better results and you just iteratively get better and better. Okay, maybe, I don't know what your real name is. It could be maybe 71, but I don't think so. How is the pricing for each of the choices set? Okay, so the pricing is set by you behind the scenes. Let me just see. Okay, I'm just looking at the number of questions that I might have to deal with just to work out how much time to spend. If I go back to here very quickly, and if I go into, don't use that mouse on the trackpad here, right. If I go to the home page is what the client sees. This is all your pricing models, and you would go straight into a model. But in the top, you've got a cogwheel. That's where you go into the settings, behind the scenes. And it's in the settings where you'll spend most of your time, I think, in model management. Once you've set things up and put your logo instead of effective pricing, once it's got your color scheme, so for example, Nina's is a beautiful lavender purpley color, her software, to match the brochures, to match the proposals. You would go into model management and you can change everything about the questions. So if I go into cleanup work, which is down here. And if I hit the edit button, if I edit cleanup work, and if I just hit save and continue for a moment, so I can change, for example, on the left-hand side, you will see, as I'm moving my mouse up and down, a workflow of things that you can set. So you can change the questions, you can change the packages, so those bronze, silver, gold, if you like, and you can have up to 5 packages. You can choose what you put and what you include and exclude in the packages. That's what you will then show the client. You can build your discounts or behavior rewards. Everything can be built up and changed. So going back to the question, how is the pricing for each of the choices set? What we do is the pricing, the calculations, the math is done in the order of the questions. So the first question is the one that starts the calculations. So the first one I've got is how many sales invoices per month do you raise? I'll hit the edit button. You might not like that question because you've done for cleanup work a diagnostic and you know exact number of transactions. So you might change the question from how many sales invoices per month to how many transactions per month. Okay, that's it, I've done. It's as simple as that to change the questions. And this one was a drop-down box. So what we can do with our questions is we can choose whether the questions are drop-down, it's a series of options they choose, or whether it's a yes-no question, which is usually what you'll use for preference questions. Do you want it done fast or slow, yes or no? It may be a value, how many bank accounts, and there's free text as well. That has no impact on the math, but it's the first three. 3 types of questions and a range of different calculation types. By far and away, the most common ones you'll use are add and multiply. So are we adding something or multiplying? The first question always wants to be add. So basically we're taking a number to start the calculations off. So in this case, if you've got 71 to 200, which is the case I chose, then it starts off with a number 150 in the calculations. And it'll build based upon subsequent questions. So that gives me a starting point. So 150 if they've got about 100 transactions a month. And if I now click save and just go to the second one to give you another example, the next question is how many months behind are you? And so what this one does is, that's right, it multiplies by the value. So basically that price from the first table is multiplied by the number of months they are behind. If they're 3 months behind, it'll be 3 lots of that. If they're 6 months, it'll be 6 lots of that earlier number. And that's how the price builds up. And then and you can see, so if you have too many questions, I just pressed something by mistake there. What did I do? Let's go back to where I was. You see, if you have too many questions, it can get quite complicated. But when you've built your questions, at the very end in the review stage, you can then test it. So before you use it live in front of a client, you might start to put in some numbers and say, okay, if I have a client that's got 100 transactions a month and they are, let's say, 3 months behind and they're on QBO, they're a bar and a cafe, how much will the price work out at? If you just hit the calculate button, you'll be able to see how the price is building up based on the questions, which will help you with your testing. And at the end of the process, bottom of the screen, you'll see that equates to 3 payments of 716 for the full cleanup. If you feel that's about right, you can now go and start talking to clients and using it. If you feel that's not quite right, you can look here and think, it's probably not adding enough in for certain types of it's going from 450 to 540 because of bars, cafes and restaurants, and you might think, actually bars, cafes and restaurants are a bit of a pain. I want to charge a higher price for them. So you just simply at this point just go back to questions, find that particular question, which was what type of business are you in, edit, and in this case what happens is if they're a bar, cafe and restaurants, it multiplies by 1.2. It adds a 20% uplift on the price, and I can hit modify, edit that and change that, go back and just retest it and see if I feel comfortable with that. Okay, I hope that helps with that particular question. Maybe we have 16 minutes left. Let me see what the next question is. Janine says, oh yes, checklist please. So hopefully Janine, you've seen that in the link somewhere in the comments. Chantal says, once the price is agreed on a Zoom call via screen share, couldn't we send the proposal and have them sign and return and set up payments on the call? You could do, yes, absolutely. You would, You could either press the button to download it as a PDF, send it to them. I know that at least one of my members, he then puts it into Practice Ignition. David Pankovic does. He puts it into Practice Ignition and then uses Practice Ignition to deal with the signing and the payments and stuff. So yes, you could do all that on the Zoom call if you want to. The only reason why you might do it later, Chantal, is simply because you might want to tweak the proposal. So in other words, you can build proposal templates that all look beautiful. In fact, let me just click on, so let's look at this one here from, this is the standard template that we've built for Nina. And when Nina then does a proposal for a client, if she's happy as this is, that's fine. She could then produce it in seconds, kind of like I did just earlier. But what you can do is you can pull up the proposal template once you've done the price, and Nina might want to just amend that first sentence or add an extra sentence and say, hi there, Jim, here's my proposal as we discussed earlier. So that's why you might want to do the proposals after the meeting, because you might want to tailor them for that specific client. But if you don't want to, if you're happy with your template and that's perfect, you could do it all straight away in the meeting. Doreen says, what does Doreen say? Where are you posting the link to the checklist guide you were just showing? Sarah's posted it, Doreen, you're in Facebook. It's in the Facebook group. I saw it. If you don't see it, it should be there. If you don't see it, I'll ask Sarah if she can also put the link in the description as well. And Chantal's just said that Sarah's just shared the link. So hopefully you can see it. Right, I'm not sure if this is your real name or not. Shanliliu, is that? Do you have a sample list of preference questions? No, I don't, because I have Sarah here. Hello.
Just to respond to you, I'm having some problems posting in YouTube the link to the checklist. So it'll go into the Facebook group, but not into YouTube.
Okay. We're having some challenges putting the link into the YouTube comments. Facebook is fine, YouTube's a challenge. We'll get it in there. After the session, we'll edit the description and the link will be in there. Don't worry, we can get it to you. Or if you are part of the Academy, just email Sarah and she can send it to you. So the question was, do you have a sample list of preference questions? Well, no, because every service is different. So you'll need to use your creativity. Now, having said that, when you subscribe to Effective Pricing, then there are different plans. There's the starter plan, the full plan, the pro plan. Depending on which one you go for, there are models that I've created that are built into it. And if you go for the pro plan, there are dozens of models. So if I just go back to, just bear me a second, let me show you what I mean. So if I go to the model, this is where you can manage all of your pricing models. So I showed you, this is where I'd go to edit a model. If I go to the bottom, where it says use model, these are all models I've built for you, and these are all available with the Pro plan. They're not all available with the Starter plan, it depends on the plan you've got, but I've written models for you for personal tax returns, tax planning and incorporation, payroll, bookkeeping, cleanup work, price consulting, and so much more. And I've done that to get you started. You could use them out of the box, and for all of those, I've given some suggested preference questions. The reason why I don't give you a prescriptive list of questions is because every service is different. So a great preference question to ask, here's one I really like, is if you're doing work that involves meetings with clients. So if you're an accountant, CPA, you do annual financial statements. At the end of the year, you have a meeting to go through the annual financial statements, to talk around the taxes and so on. You could ask the question, when we have your annual review meeting, who would you like that to be with? Me, the senior partner, or my assistant? And you know they always choose you. And they choose you because they value you. And that's great. But if they choose you, you can charge a higher price. And if the price is then too high, then you can give them a choice. Well, this is the price if you want to work with me and have the review with me, But if you're happy to work with Fred, my assistant, it's a lower price. It's your choice, client. We let the client choose. People love to choose. If they are willing to pay more, they get to work with you. If money's more issue, they'll work with your assistant, Fred. So that's a preference question. And that would be an appropriate preference question if you're doing a service where there will be a meeting, perhaps an annual review meeting with annual financial statements. But it might not be so appropriate for, let's say, tax returns or payroll, because you don't tend to have a review meeting with payroll. So different preference questions will suit different services. The other thing to think about as well is, and I don't want to go into this right now because it's more advanced, or it's what I teach in the Value Pricing Academy, but you'll sometimes want to think about, should something be a preference question where they can choose whether they want that yes or no? Or should it be something that we build into the package? Let me give you a crazy example just to kind of illustrate that. So McDonald's have a package. They don't do bronze, silver, gold, but they have one package called the Happy Meal. The McDonald's Happy Meal is a package of things aimed at children. Now, what they could do, and they don't because it would be crazy, but what they could do is they could say, rather than having a toy in the box, this is the price of the Happy Meal, and we ask the client the question, do you want a toy, yes or no? And depending on whether they say yes or no, the price changes. So we have a choice to make. Do we make it a preference question which changes the price, or do we put it into a bundled package? And sometimes that's a choice you'll want to make. Sometimes it makes more sense to make something a preference rather than built into a package. And the example I normally give is, I would never have my packages, my bronze, silver, gold, differentiated by frequency. For example, if I was offering a bookkeeping service, I might have a bronze, silver, gold bookkeeping. And they all have a theme. But I want to ask a preference question first that says, how often do you want the bookkeeping doing? Do you want it done every single week, every day, every month, every quarter, or once a year? Because some people want it done more frequently. And if they want it done weekly or daily, we can do that, but we should charge a higher price. And I think that's a great preference question. I've seen some people build their bronze, silver, gold, where bronze is weekly bookkeeping, middle packages, premium, bronze might be quarterly, silver might be monthly, and premium might be weekly. I think that's a mistake. I think there's other ways to differentiate the packages and use the frequency as the preference question. Okay, we have 7 minutes left. Let me see if I can get through some more questions. As Mary says, very ingenious bit of software. Thank you for that feedback. Sorry, Jessica. The link apparently is in YouTube it's just that it says it's from Restream Bot. The reason for that is because we use Restream to that puts the comments in both places. That probably makes no sense to you whatsoever. It does to me. Okay. Okay, this might be the last question, which is good. We've got 7 minutes left. Chantal says, I have a client wanting an 11-year cleanup. 11-year clean. Did you ask this question before? I've had somebody else ask this question. An 11-year cleanup. Is there an option to do a 12-month payment plan in effective pricing? Somebody asked this question, Sarah, didn't they, a couple of months back? Don't think it was Chantal. And that then led us to doing a Friday session about 4 weeks ago, I'm guessing, but about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we did a session on the payment plan, because there's a lot of flexibility and things you can do with the payment plan. But sometimes it's not fully possible to model everything that you might want into the payment plan. And so we taught a workaround. And so let me give you an example, because I'm not going to answer the question, Chantal, just because I can't figure out in my head. I can't remember exactly where. I think you can do it, but I can't think off the top of my head how you do it. I think I covered it on that training. So what I'm going to suggest, Chantal, is that that perhaps Sarah gives you a link to the training on the payment plan, and that might answer your question. If I just go to the software again for a brief moment, and this might take me a little while. Let me just pick a model. So I'll just go back to the home page. Let's imagine I'm going to be pricing, I don't know, well, let's do cleanup work. No, we'll do cloud setup. There's less questions, I think. So we're setting somebody up on QuickBooks Online. Just pick a client. I'm not bothered about how I answer the questions. Let me just get to the payment plan. Okay, and I want save and continue. Okay, so someone asked me the question, what if I've got something that's 4 payments? So if this is 3 payments, so what happens on the payment plan is you can then, let's say it's 3 payments, then you can set the date of that first payment. So you can agree in the meeting, okay, we've agreed the price, it's 3 payments, this is payment number 1, and what the software will do and what it will build into the payment plan is the date of payment 2 and 3, and what it does for payments 2 and 3, which it says here, regular payment remaining, which will be 2 lots of 587, will be exactly a month later. And someone said, if I've got 4 payments, can I make them quarterly? And you can't, because the software always makes the recurring payments monthly. But there is a workaround by doing it. You can still do everything apart from the exact dates. And then what you could do is you could create a nice little table in Excel and very easily put it into a proposal. It doesn't take too long. So if you do want to do really, really complex things with your payment plans, there's lots of flexibility, but worst case scenario, you could then separately pull it into your proposal as a screenshot image from Excel, if you want to do that. But go and watch that video, Chantal, on the payment plan, and I'm fairly sure I addressed that issue. Right, we have 3 minutes left. Sybil says, I recently finished a 9-year cleanup. I find that staggering, only because in the UK, we got quite strict with tax returns when self-assessment came in the late 90s, with big penalties if you're 1 year behind. And when I ran my accounting firm, I couldn't conceive of someone being 9 years behind. Parul says, what is the charge for getting the effective pricing software? Sarah, can you put the link into the chat box for the software? You just go to effectivepricing.co.uk. Normally I've opened it up in advance. And I can't tell you the number. The reason for that, Parul, the price depends, A, on the plan that you go for, starter, full, pro. And secondly, it depends on your currency, because you'll choose your country, what country you're in. So if you're in South Africa, for example, it's probably better for you to pay in South African rand. So go and check out the website. 2 minutes left. Chantal says the link to the train would be great. Yes, we can do that. Is this a competition or something? Sharon said, we had a client with 14 years of back work. Okay, so beat that, everybody else. 14 years, eh? Right. And Kim has to jump to another meeting. Okay, well, we're about done. So, and it's the weekend. It's the weekend. So let's start to wrap things up. Thank you so much for coming along. Next week we will back to, fingers crossed, that we'll be back to this scheduled session with Emily, where she's going to show you some really exciting stuff with how we can do designs in Canva and then pull them through and create those amazing proposals. Okay, I'm going to leave out with a little bit of music so that if you want to type in more comments, I usually spend 3 minutes just reading through the comments and seeing what you've said. Thank you so much for coming on. If you've enjoyed this, by the way, please let me know by just clicking that thumbs up like button if you've enjoyed it, and have an amazing weekend. I will see you all again soon. Next week's mentoring week if you're in the academy. Otherwise, I might see you next Friday for the next one of these. Thank you so much, and goodbye for now.
I wasted all my time, I wasted all my nights, I wasted it on someone who's indifferent. He didn't love me right,